Alright, for real, doing the chapter summaries for the second half of Public Opinion by Walter Lippmann. This is the last video that I want to make on this, so I'm just going to run through these. I'm going to allow myself to do it not as great as I would like to, but just know that there's a ton of value in the second half of this book. So we're starting with chapter 8, Blind Spots and Their Value. Marxism is not necessarily what Karl Marx wrote in Das Kapital, but whatever it is that all the warring sects believe who claim to be the faithful. For while there is a reciprocating influence between the standard version and the current versions, it is these current versions as distributed among men which affect their behavior. And then he talks about the theory of relativity promises to develop into a principle as adequate to universal application as was the theory of evolution. Evolution became, over time, a very general term. It also became imprecise until, in many cases, the original definite meaning of the word was lost, and the theory it had been evoked to describe was misunderstood. And talking about how there's potential for that same fate for the theory of relativity. History repeats itself, and relativity, like evolution, after receiving a number of intelligible but somewhat inaccurate popular expositions in its scientific aspect, will be launched on a world-conquering career. One of the thoughts that came up for me while I was reading this originally was how this ties to source material, the value of going to source material. And so one of the things, and kind of actually exactly what he's saying, is that Marxism is not necessarily what was written by Marx in Das Kapital, right? Or even in the Communist Manifesto. It's the current version as distributed among men. So, so long as the mainstream media is just telling people that communism can't work, Marx is a bad guy, an idiot, he inspired all of these horrible people, don't bother. How many of those people who are getting that information are going to say, you know what? No, I am going to bother. And they go and read it, right? That doesn't happen often. And so the issue here being, for a number of things, people aren't going back to the source material. So they're not actually getting the true, like, Marx's words as they were written for their interpretation to understand it on their own. Instead, they're getting a diluted, filtered, motivated interpretation from somebody else. And so I think about how, and then I was thinking about the theory of relativity, and right, I grew up in the twilight years of Einstein and Hawking, right? Hawking was more alive throughout most of my life so far. But I think Einstein died when I was in 6th grade. I could be wrong about that. But the point being that the further we get away from their primary source of information in being able to explain this and interpret their theories, right? One of the great things about someone like Einstein was he was able to express his theories, these complicated scientific mathematical concepts, through imagery and imagination, these imaginative ways. Without him to be able to be the primary resource, now we're relying on secondhand accounts and interpretations of that that don't come from him. And so there's a real threat to the integrity of the true understanding of what he meant. And that's a natural thing. So I think the point is just like, and the point of underpinning so much of this is just like, this isn't good or bad. This thing is just natural. This happens. And so we need to acknowledge that it happens and factor it in when we are assessing, different things or making decisions. So oh, yeah. Okay, this is an interesting one too. In the case of progress, both these conditions were filled in English, and then the most striking evidence was furnished by the mechanical revolution. Men who were born at the beginning of the century had seen, before they had passed the age of 30, the rapid development of steam navigation, the illumination of towns and houses by gas, the opening of the first railway. In the consciousness of the average householder, miracles like these formed the pattern of his belief in the perfectibility of the human race. Abstract that, like, take that, apply it to my experience, right? In my upbringing, I saw the explosion of the internet. Like, I grew up we would have been among the first early adopters of like household computers. Like, having not, until I was in middle school, not every house had a computer, and certainly not every house had a computer that they were using very often, right? I remember when my parents brought home their first cell phones. I was probably 7. So in my life, I have seen I've seen computers become introduced to homes and shrunken to handheld size and portable. I've seen phones turn into computers. I've seen the entire globe become instantly connected globally, right? We've seen a citizen create a space agency, right? I get, like, we've seen people go to the moon. So but more to my life, the adoption, we've seen the internet connect the globe. We've seen a globalized economy, right? Until, so for the first 12 years of my life, formed the pattern of this belief of the perfectibility, but also the innovation, the continuous improvement on quality, these crazy leaps in advancement, huge jumps, not just steps, but jumps, rocket launching, propelling us to the moon type of progress. And right, for a lot of people, 2008, like, that was the first time. The housing crisis was the first jarring moment of like, oh, we're not invincible and progress doesn't, happen infinitely, whatever. We're not immune to setbacks. So, but I guess to get into the psychology of kind of what caused the 2008 crisis was, in a sense, that mentality that, like, we're invincible. Let's just create, we can do whatever, like, nothing, what's the worst that can happen kind of thing. I don't know. So, the stereotype represented by such words as progress and perfection was composed fundamentally of mechanical inventions. In America, more than anywhere else, the spectacle of mechanical progress has made so deep an impression that it has suffused the whole moral code. And an American will endure almost any insult except the charge that he is not progressive. Right, so similar to this idea of, like, if you grow up in a period of tremendous advancement, you believe that in this perfectibility of the human race. That's deeply ingrained. That's given to you during formative years, this perfection, right? But deeply inherent also into the American kind of collective conscious, if you're going to buy into collective consciousness. The mechanical advancements are really the key to American success, and the rise and sort of the value of the U.S., the thing that it kind of inspires in people, it's due to mechanical progress. Ideologically, the formation, but also it's the trains allowing us to develop a country so rapidly. Like, it was the perfect time to be creating a new country, right? So not a part of our kind of conscious interpretation of, U.S. excellence, right, is just a sheer fact about how lucky we were to have the mechanical revolution occur at the same time that we were developing. And so these mechanical developments helped us progress and rise to the top so fast that, of course, we believed in the value of that progress. But the thing is, when that perspective is so deeply ingrained into the national understanding, the national identity, kind of the public opinion, like, it just exists perpetually in that state of mind. Like, mechanical progress is always great, right? That's how we became who we are. That progress is the reason. But I don't know how to describe it. There is a limit, right? The value of it was because we were starting from nothing. And so we needed to build everything. And so you need a lot of development in that period of time. But once you reach the top and you're at a sustained level and you've developed kind of everywhere, the need for that progress has diminishing returns. And I think we are on the backswing of that right now, but we still have the mentality that progress is necessary. So we are pushing at the same intensity level, but directed in, towards essentially nothing, no real value thing. And then we maintain the idea that it's progress. I don't know, it's crazy. To be sure, the ideal confuses excellence with size, happiness with speed, and human nature with contraption. Yet the same motives are at work which have ever actuated any moral code or ever will. The desire for the biggest, the fastest, the highest, or if you are a maker of wristwatches or microscopes, the smallest. The love, in short, of the superlative and the peerless is in essence and possibility a noble passion. With the stereotype of progress before their eyes, Americans have in the mass seen little that did not accord with that progress. They saw the expansion of cities, but not the accretion of slums. They cheered the census statistics, but refused to consider overcrowding. They pointed with pride to their growth, but would not see the drift from the land or the unassimilated immigration. They expanded industry furiously at reckless cost to their natural resources. They built up gigantic corporations without arranging for industrial relations. They grew to one of the most powerful nations on earth without preparing their institutions or their minds for the ending of their isolation. So, another key element to this too is that progress and that mindset is really only valuable in an isolated setting where you need to rise to self-sufficiency. But once you've exceeded self-sufficiency and now you're on a global scale, right, that pursuit turns into a really kind of gross, insidious form of competition where you're seeking to be peerless. And so that means crushing everybody else. So again, tying back to the title of this chapter, there comes a time when the blind spots come from the edge of vision into the center. So these things that are all kind of in the peripheral, right? We need to expand rapidly. Progress is in mechanical innovation. There comes a time where it becomes like it forces the perspective to the center that, hey, maybe this perspective is not right anymore. At one point it was, but now it's not. Uncritically held, the stereotype not only censors out much that needs to be taken into account, but when the day of reckoning comes and the stereotype is shattered, likely as not, that which it did wisely take into account is shipwrecked with it. The progressive stereotype, powerful to incite work, almost completely obliterates the attempt to decide what work and why that work. And that's the feeling that's bubbling up today, right? So he was predicting a future event at the time. That event is here now, and the peripheral that's coming, the blind spot that's coming into focus now is that this progressive stereotype, this stereotype of progress in the US was useful to incite work originally, originally and early on, and to expand and grow rapidly. But it now has obliterated the attempt to decide what work and why that work today. What work is valuable and why it's valuable is not up for discussion. Whatever is established, whatever is available is what we're going to do. And I could go off on a bunch of things that I've just learned about similarities to that in the experience of China today. But